The Checkpoint is presented by GM Pharma, the first international multinational pharmaceutical company in Georgia. GM Pharma, to serve those who need it most.
On May 10, 2023, the Monetary Policy Committee of the National Bank of Georgia decided to decrease the monetary policy rate, the refinancing rate, by 0.5%. The monetary policy rate stands at 10.5%. We should go through the road to Europe together, first to the end of this year, then other stages, said Georgian President Salome Zurabishvili during an event celebrating Europe's Day. The president says Georgia should not miss the opportunity to get EU candidate country status. I appeal to all political leaders to pause and listen to what the people of Georgia are asking you to do, European Union Ambassador to Georgia Paul Herchinsky said during his speech at the event dedicated to Europe's Day. According to the EU ambassador, joining the EU requires strong political will and unwavering commitment to fulfilling the criteria, so unity, hard work and many compromises are needed, which is not easy but possible.
Dear people of Georgia and dear President Salome Zurabishvili, today is Europe Day and is the first time there is Europe Day since the EU leader stated that Georgia's future is within the EU. You people of Georgia, you made a clear choice for the European values, a clear choice for freedom. And that's why your future is within our common European family. I wish you the best. We are with you, with all of you. Happy Europe Day.
Total revenues of the fast food sector reached several hundreds of millions of lari, among which the Georgian franchises of international brands are the most profitable. Currently, 4 global fast food players are represented in Georgia, namely McDonald's, Wendy's, Dunkin' Donuts, KFC and Subway. McDonald's ranks first in terms of number of restaurants and revenues. It is represented in Georgia by the company T&K Restaurants, which operates 21 restaurants and a logistics center. The second fast food player in Georgia is KFC, which is represented by Iberia Food Company. This is The Checkpoints. I'm Elena Gvanjilashvili, author and the host of the show, and the Checkpoints team is ready to sum up the business and economics week for you. The April CPI print came in even lower than TBC Capital's bullish expectations. Importantly, on a monthly basis, domestic and to a large extent service inflation demonstrate normalization. Unless the lari weakens, July year-on-year headline CPI should hit a deflationary trajectory. While we do not see deflation as a major challenge for growth and employment in Georgia, the deflationary outlook as such is still a lari negative, TBC chief economist Otar Nadaraya wrote in a weekly overview. According to him, this combined with continuous appreciation pressures on the FX market and stronger FC credit recently is a sufficient argument later this week to expect a first rate cut of 50 basis points with an easing to at least 9.5% by the end of the year. According to another major investment bank in Georgia, Galt and Taggart international reserves stand at all-time high $5.1 billion in April 2023. Gross international reserves increased by 34.2% year-on-year to an all-time high $5.1 billion in April 2023, according to NBG. On a monthly basis, the reserves were up by 2.6%. Changes in reserves were attributed to the government and banking sector FX operations, likely also to NBG's FX purchases. Information will be available on May 25. More on this week's economic news and outlook.
In March 2023, the construction index increased by 1.7% compared to the previous month, according to the preliminary data from the National Statistics Office of Georgia. As of the document, the change was mainly due to a 14 6.8% increase in the average monthly nominal wages of employees in the construction sector, which contributed 2.55 percentage points to the total index change. Compared to February 2022, the construction cost index increased by 6.6%. The latter was largely caused by the 4.8% increase in the prices for construction materials, which contributed 2.69 percentage points to the total index change. Russia has cancelled visa regime for Georgian citizens. According to Putin's decree, the visa regime will be abolished from May 15. In addition, Russia President Vladimir Putin has also lifted the ban on flights to Georgia from Russian airlines. The relevant order has been posted on the official internet portal of Russia. Russian airlines will operate 7 direct flights from Moscow to Tbilisi per week, according to the press service of Ministry of Transport of Russia. According to the document, the order of President of Russian Federation dated June 2019, which prohibited Russian airlines from flying between Georgia and Russia, was declared invalid. Georgian President Salome Zurabishvili termed Russian President Vladimir Putin's move exempting Georgian citizens from visa requirements and lifting a ban on direct flights another provocation. According to President Zurabishvili, the move is unacceptable while Russia continues aggression against Ukraine and occupation of Georgia's territories. Another Russian provocation, resuming direct flights and lifting the visa ban with Georgia, is unacceptable as long as Russia continues its aggression on Ukraine and occupies our territory, she tweeted. Russia has lifted a visa requirement for Georgians per a decree signed by Russian President Vladimir Putin on Wednesday. By another decree, President Putin cancelled the ban on direct flights of Russian airlines and the sale of tours to Georgia that had been in force since 2019. Deputy Economy Minister Mariam Kurivishvili echoed Russia's recent move to lift the ban on direct flights to Georgia. She claims the very decision will significantly facilitate the travel of up to 1 million Georgian citizens living in the Russian Federation. Kurivishvili vows the country prioritize its population, their well-being, and everything that serves their economic strengthening. She explained that number of direct flights were carried out from Russia to many countries, while stressing that no sanctioned airlines operate in Georgia. Non-sanctioned airlines and aircraft, if they apply, will be permitted to fly direct flights in Georgia, just as they do in Israel, Turkey, Azerbaijan, and United Arab Emirates, she noted. The volume of container cargo shipments in Poti Port hit a record high in April 2023. The port handled 53,000 TEU containers in April, which was 91.3% higher compared to April 2022. Overall, the volume of containers handled by APM Terminal Poti in the first 4 months of 2023 was 177,000 TEU, which was 73% higher compared to the same period of the last year. Along with this, receiving of container ships has also increased significantly. Since the beginning of the year, APM Terminal Poti received 74.6% more than last year. As an increase is also observed in the number of containers imported by railway. In January-April 2023, the number of incoming and processed containers was the highest among the number recorded in the last 3 years. The International Monetary Fund raised Georgia's economic growth forecast for 2023 by 1 percentage point from 4 to 5%, James John, mission chief of the International Monetary Fund, reported. James John said inflation would remain below MBG's 3% target in 2023. Looking ahead, growth is projected to converge to its potential rate of a little above 5% in 2023, while inflation would remain below the MBG's 3% target, reflecting the forecast described above, including a continued tight monetary policy stance with positive real interest rates. Over the medium term, growth is expected to remain close to potential, supported by infrastructure investments and an expected improvement in global economic and financial conditions. Inflation is forecast to be close to the target in 2024, given high uncertainty regarding global economic and financial developments and political conditions. Policies should remain focused on entrenching macroeconomic and financial stability and maintaining the momentum for structural reforms, said IMF mission chief. I think that if Mr. Putin wanted to show that he cares about Georgia, he would withdraw the Russian troops from Abkhazia and Tkhinvali and fulfill his obligations under the 2008 ceasefire agreement, cancel Russia's recognition of Abkhazia and Tkhinvali, the U.S. ambassador to Georgia, Kelly Degnan, said. According to her, the United States cannot comment on whether this will affect Georgia's candidate status. This raises the question why Putin is doing this for Georgia now. I'm sure no one believes that he cares about the comfort of Georgian passengers. We have seen that sometimes Putin uses the presence of Russians in the country to interfere in this country. I think many Georgians are already worried about the presence of hundreds of thousands of Russians in Georgia who arrived last year. Now we hear from the Russian tourist agency that another million may arrive as a result of the opening of direct flights, said Degnan.
Georgia headquartered bank receives an upgraded credit rating from Fitch Ratings. The bank's long-term issuer default rating is upgraded to BB from BB- and its viability rating is upgraded to BB from BB-. The outlook remains stable. Fitch says the upgrade is driven by TBC Bank's strong performance through several economic cycles, as well as its sound business profile, strong profitability and high capitalization. Chief Executive Vakhtang Butskhrikidze says, "We are very pleased with the upgrade of TBC's credit ratings by Fitch. This rating action is a clear testimony of the bank's fundamental financial strength and risk profile, robust profitability, sound asset quality, and strong capital position." Fitch Ratings has upgraded JSC Bank of Georgia's long-term issuer default rating to BB from BB- and its viability rating to BB from BB-. The outlook on the IDR is stable. The upgrade of BOG reflects strong performance through the cycle, including through several economic downturns. According to Fitch Ratings, some of the credit factors, particularly business profile, profitability and capitalization, proved resilient and are exceptionally strong in the local context. We believe Georgia's buoyant economic growth, strengthening sovereign credit profile, and improving external finances, which are captured by the positive outlook on Georgia's IDRs, would improve the banking sector's operating environment and underpin the stability of the local banks, including BOG's key credit metrics. Therefore, we have revised the outlook on the operating environment for banks in Georgia to positive, Fitch Ratings wrote. And now on to Natia Taktakishvili, our reporter, who will provide weekly business news and outlook. Natia, the floor is yours.
Tornike Samkharadze, executive director of the company Zarabkhana, declares that 95% of Zarabkhana customers are Georgian citizens. As the executive director of the company told TV program Business Morning, the sales were significantly up in 2022, and this trend was still maintained in Q1 2023. Sales hit a record high late in 2022. The demand growth is observed this year as well. We have finished April with a 50% increase compared to the previous year. Zarabkhana has similar expectations for May, Samkharadze explained. According to him, local customers make a choice on expensive products while foreigners spend from 2,000 lari to 3,000 lari. Samkharadze says that in a month and a half, the company will complete the arrangement of the new enterprise with an investment of 1.5 million lari. Hotel Royal Batoni was closed in Kakheti Khwareli municipality due to the reconstruction. According to the hotel manager Alina Sarinian, Royal Batoni was closed on December 2020 amid the pandemic and has not been opened since then. The manager of the hotel cannot clarify the opening dates of the Royal Batoni, although she says that they started working on the project last year. After the pandemic, it was decided to renovate hotel and expand it with several rooms. We started working on this project last year, and at this stage, we are working on project agreements with design companies. We still don't know how many rooms will be added to the hotel and what amount of investment will be made, says Alina Sarinian. Hotel Royal Batoni near Ilia Lake was built in cooperation with the Partnership Fund and the company Viniveria. The investment value of the project was 2.3 million lari. The 32-room hotel was launched in 2013 and included a restaurant, a pool and a conference space. Tour company Avianet declares that travel became expensive by 20% this year compared to the same period of 2019. But as Amiran Abesadze, director of the company, says, it doesn't apply to Egypt tours because travel to this country has become cheaper by 10%. The reason for the price reduction on Egypt tours was the local tour operators reduced the hotel prices, which had a positive impact on the price of the final tour packages, said Amiran Abesadze. According to him, Egypt, Turkey and Cyprus are the most in-demand travel destinations among Georgian travelers. The cost of the tour package in Egypt starts from 1,300 lari, Turkey from 1,400 lari, and the cheapest is Cyprus, which starts from 900 lari. Hypermarket chain Gorgia will appear in Gori soon, as the head of the company, Tornike Guruli, said during his visit to TUI program Real Estate Prospect. One of their strategic directions is Gori, and they will definitely open a hypermarket this year. There is a great demand from Gori, and not a single day goes by without asking to open a new branch in the city. We also conducted research on the local market, and Gori is one of the important cities where development is underway in this direction, he said. Gorgia offers more than 50,000 types of construction, repair and household products to the customers. At this stage, hypermarket Gorgia is represented by 10 branches in 6 cities of Georgia. Kati Dolidze, one of the founders of the strawberry greenhouse Mageme, notes that according to this year's forecast, the harvest will exceed last year's amount, so the company expects to take more than 20 tons of strawberries this year. According to her, Mageme has no problem in selling strawberries. Mageme strawberries are sold in the digital market on moitane.g as well as Nikora Chase and Agro stores. The company also offers agro tours to the schools and kindergartens. In the local market, Mageme strawberries greenhouses was set up in 2021. Last year, the farm was expanded with an investment of 350,000 lari. Today, Mageme holds 2 greenhouses. Tea producing company Plantation plans to increase product price due to the expensive raw and packaging materials. Accordingly, the company will increase product price by over 10%. In addition, the brand plans to build a new enterprise. We have agro credit, and very soon we will start building a new enterprise which will be located on a land area of 200 square meters. In addition, we want to introduce the ISO standard, says the founder of Plantation, Lana Jrenti. According to her, blueberry, black and green tea will appear under the brand Plantation from September. Tea producing company covers 5 hectares and they have a micro enterprise located on 50 square meters. They invested 300,000 lari in the project. Currently, Plantation's products are only available through online platforms. Local price-producing company Vaime Spices plans to create an international spice shop chain. The company will open its first international stores in the capital of Hungary. Georgi Gogia, the founder of Vaime Spices, spoke to BM.G about the plans to expand the chain and enter the world market. In the next 5 years, we plan to open 3 stores a year in the EU countries. This year, the company is opening 3 stores in Hungary, and next year we will enter another country. We want to create an international chain of spice shops, which will offer a special style of sales and services, said Gogia. The director of the company notes that they are investing 110,000 euros in the partnership with European investors to open 3 mono-brand stores in Hungary this year, and their partners are supporting the strategy of expanding the chain across Europe. Manavi Wine started exporting its products to Ireland. Georgi Ayvaziani, the founder of the winery, wrote about this on his personal Facebook page. Georgi Ayvaziani, the founder of Manavi Wine, told BM.G that Ireland is the first exporting market for the company and they have great hopes. 2 years ago, I founded a company in Manavi that produces natural wines. Until now, our natural wines are sold in G Vino, Coffee Lab, Bar Underground, noted the winemaker. According to the company, over 1,000 bottles of wine have been exported from Manavi to Ireland. The founder of the winery notes that Georgian natural wine will be sold in wine shops and bars in Reykjavik within a week. Manavi Wines was launched 2 years ago in the village of Manavi, Sagarejo municipality, and in 2022 it produced 10,000 bottles of natural wine.
The State Insurance Supervision Service is working on a motor third-party liability insurance, or MTPL, that will enter into force in 2024. Last week, the International Insurance Conference was held in Tbilisi. In attendance was an insurance expert and professor at KU Leuven, Karen Can-Hule. Georgi Aronia had a chance to interview him about MTPL insurance in general and the Georgian insurance market.
Mr. Van Hule, greetings. It's a pleasure to have you here today at BMG.
I'm very pleased to be here. It's my first time in Georgia, and I must say I like it very much. The weather is very nice today. It wasn't the day before, but I learned a lot, and especially the foods, the people are very nice. Really a discovery for me.
Well, thank you, and we're very happy to have you during your first visit here at BMG. Mr. Van Hule, you are considered to be the father of Solvency II regulation, among many different things. You know, you are a professor, you have a vast academic background, you have a background of working in the European Commission for many, many years. But before we jump into all of this and we discuss all the regulations and the background in detail, I want to ask you about the purpose of your visit, which, as I know, is that you attended the Georgian International Insurance Conference. So let's talk briefly about the conference. Could you summarize what were the main topics discussed on the conference?
Well, with pleasure. Actually, this conference had been planned a long time ago, but COVID intervened, and so we were all pleased that it could take place here in Georgia. And basically, the conference discussed insurance in general, particularly health insurance, which is the main insurance business line in Georgia. And then we spend a lot of time also discussing MTPL insurance, which is a mandatory motor insurance liability. When the drivers cause accidents, somebody has to pay and compensate. And Georgia apparently is one of the very few countries in the world. I think I know of one other, which is South Africa, which doesn't have mandatory MTPL. So we discussed that, all the advantages to move towards mandatory MTPL, because this is in line. I understand that the Parliament will adopt a bill in this area, and we're very pleased in Europe about that, because motor insurance concerns all the countries, because Georgian drivers will go to other countries. We come to Georgia with the car, so we want to be protected. And then the second day of the conference, we discussed Solvency II, the possible introduction in Georgia of a new solvency regime for the insurance industry.
Okay, let's discuss both of those topics, but let's begin with MTPL regulation, which we understand will be soon present here in Georgia. Could you elaborate a little bit on the functionality of it? You know, will it be beneficial for Georgia as a whole? And could you compare the Georgian version of the regulation to its European examples?
Yeah, there are very few insurances in Europe that are mandatory, and MTPL is one of them. In fact, the view that we have in Europe is that when you have a driver license, you can only implement it and execute it when you have insurance. That's very important for the citizens, because everybody wants to drive a motor car, but nobody wants to pay the premium for insurance. But when I cause an accident, I can kill people, I can create a lot of damages, and it's only fair that we create a system, a kind of a pooling system, that's the idea of insurance, whereby the people who cause these accidents are contributing through premiums to an insurance system, whereby then that money is used to compensate the victims of accidents if these accidents occur. It's a kind of solidarity, and in that sense, for the citizens in Georgia, this is a must. Not a must for tomorrow, but a must for today. You need to have that. You need to have that protection so that you know when you drive, when as a pedestrian you walk in the street and that you get overrun by a car, that you will get that compensation. And of course, to move from a system that you have here, where it is entirely free, to a system that is mandatory, you cannot do that overnight. Because motor insurance, the calculation of the premium, and that's maybe something I need to explain, is that in insurance, there is a link between a risk and a premium. So the higher the risk, the higher the premium. Now, how can we calculate the risk? We need data. And obviously, in Georgia, you don't have data because you don't have mandatory insurance in this area. And that's why there will be a transitional regime that will set up a pooling system whereby we will learn, see the data, and after some time, you will then be able to start liberating the market on motor insurance. That is something which many countries in Central and Eastern Europe, in the Balkan region, have already done in the past. It is not easy to do it, and it will require a lot of leadership from the supervisory authority to make sure, in cooperation with the insurance industry, that things run well. But the transition is necessary, and in the end, you will join a system which exists all over the world with a green card that will allow you to travel freely all over Europe and all over the world indeed, and to make sure that everybody will receive you with pleasure because you are insured.
Is the mandatory introduction of the MTPL crucial for Georgia to transition from Solvency I to Solvency II in the future?
No, this is not interlinked, but if Georgia, and I understand you have this association agreement with the European Union, if Georgia wants to join the European Union, wants to go further in this, relationship, it is absolutely necessary to have MTPL insurance, because otherwise it will not be possible for Georgian cars to drive into the European Union unless one shows at the border that there is a green card, that the driver actually has insurance. So that is linked to opening up Georgia to what is so important for the country. It's to be part of Europe. Sometimes people say that I'm from Europe. My response to that is, you Georgians are also part of Europe. We are all Europeans. But to be part of Europe, to be part of this international community, this is one of the steps that is absolutely needed.
What are some other steps?
The other step is the move from Solvency I to Solvency II. And that is an issue which, of course, it sounds very technical. But to explain it briefly, it basically means that insurance is absolutely essential for any country if it wants to develop its economy, because the insurers take away the risks from private individuals and from companies. Unless you have a system of insurance that works well, is well supervised, is well regulated, your economy will not develop. It is impossible. Solvency I, which is a regime that you apply now in Georgia, is a system that only looks at the insurance risk. Basically, an insurer will have to have a capital buffer that will protect the insurance company against unexpected risks in the future. And the future is unpredictable. And that's why this capital buffer is so necessary. Under Solvency I, you only look at the insurance risk. But we know, we've learned the hard way, that there are many other risks to which insurers are exposed. For instance, market risk, credit risk, operational risk. And Solvency II is a system which is fully risk-based. It says basically that this capital buffer that you need to hold as an insurer will have to cover all the risks, expected, non-expected risks. And that is very important because it will mean that insurers will not offer products on the market for which they do not have the necessary capital. And in that sense, for Georgia, it's very important because it will increase the protection, it will improve the protection of the policyholders, of the citizens, of the businesses in Georgia.
Based on your experience, how long could it take for us to transition from Solvency 1 and Solvency 2, and what needs to be done both on side from the public side, from the regulator, from the supervisor, and what needs to be done from the private insurance companies?
Well, it is, the question is very justified because it requires an effort from both, right? From the insurance industry. It will require a lot of investment in data collection, in better risk management, in better governance of the business. It also requires an input from the state. And in that respect, Georgia is the beneficiary of a twinning project with Spain, which is developing the legislation that will introduce Solvency II into Georgia. And that is, of course, very important. The project is ongoing, and I understand from the supervisor here that people there are not only being informed and trained, and the conference was part of that, but they are all discussing in detail the legislation in order to make sure that it is applicable in Georgia. How long will it take? It will take several years. And as I said this morning at the conference, and that is also the way the supervisor seems to be heading, that is, you have to follow a step-by-step approach. Lots of consultations, tests in the market, so that you make sure that the system will ultimately work.
Let's talk about the Georgian insurance market. How could you rate its current state today? And in general, what are some of the metrics that you would use in evaluating any given market, in this case, Georgian market?
Well, of course, we look at collected premiums. We look at the penetration rate of insurance. And in all these aspects, of course, Georgia is still an emerging market. That is logical. You are in the company of many other countries in Europe, in the southern part, in the Balkan, and so that have similar, also developed, still a developing insurance market. Now, what is typical for the Georgian market, and I was surprised to see that, is that your business line that is the most important is health insurance. And that sounds very strange. I don't know of any other country where, that is obviously its tradition, you know. Each country has its own way of development. There is one country in Europe, for instance, the Netherlands, where healthcare is only organized by the private sector, by private insurance. All the other countries in Europe have a system of social security and of private health insurance. You have that here, and it's very well developed. I think it's necessary to develop other business lines, because we live in a very risky environment. We need the insurance sector to take on more risks. I think about property insurance, casualty and property insurance, natural catastrophe, all these sort of things, life insurance. There's so many business lines, so many areas where the insurance industry can contribute to making this country a better place to live in.
But what should be done to develop this, highly professionalized sectors of insurance? Because as you said, yes, health insurance is the biggest one, and there are probably some reasons for that. But what could companies do to interest people to get insurance for all these different types of services?
You actually use the word professionalism. What you need two things. You need good regulation. That's the start. Because don't think that the insurance industry will do it automatically. Good regulation, good supervision, high quality supervision, professional supervision. If that is done, if insurers act professionally, which means that if a policyholder has damage which is covered by the policy, it's immediately paid out, so that people have the feeling my insurer is there to protect me, to help me. If that's the case, if people have that experience, they will ask for other products. And so the market will develop, and it's to a large extent in the hands of the insurance industry to take these opportunities, based again, very importantly, on solid regulation and solid supervision done in a professional manner.
As you just mentioned, and statistics tell us that penetration rate for insurance is not that high in Georgia. Would you attribute that to more cultural reasons, mentality reasons, for instance, or more socio-economic reasons?
I think there's all the three elements. There is a culture issue. I mean, you come out of an area where the state was protecting against everything, so people don't see the need to do that themselves. They expect the state to do that. It's cultural, also because people have a natural tendency not to think about their problems. And so you need to remind them, should you not have insurance for this or insurance for that? And of course, it's also socioeconomic, because the more developed the country is, the richer the population, the more they can spend on insurance.
Today in health insurance in particular, because it's the biggest one in Georgia, the government's involvement is pretty big as well. And compared to the involvement of the private sector within health insurance, the difference is huge. You know, based on your experience, is this a sustainable and healthy model to have for the years to come, or something has to change?
Well, here again, I would say each country has to try to do it as good as possible. What is important in this country, though, and it was underlined also at the conference yesterday, is that you need a holistic approach of health care. And this is so important because going forward, people live longer. People will have more demands for health care. And we need to provide the right products. The role of the state is to make sure that the people who cannot afford private insurance are protected. And that is something which, again, depends from country to country and has to be decided at the political level. But what is important is to take a holistic approach, which means that everybody has the right, the possibility, the means to get protection against health risks, which are manifold, as you know very well. And I think the insurance industry still has a major role to play in providing new products for things like Alzheimer and all these other diseases that will afflict the elderly population.
What are some of the best case examples of cooperation between the public sphere and the private sphere in insurance markets? And do you think that some sort of combined package of insurance, that some portion is provided by the government, but then another portion is provided by the private insurer, could work best?
Well, again, it's a matter of feeling. In most cases in Europe, I think the basic healthcare provision is done by the state. The problem is that the expenses involved, the cost of healthcare today is increasing tremendously. And therefore the countries, the governments, the budget can no longer cope with this increasing expenditure. And therefore the private health insurance is developing more and more in many countries in Europe to take care of the highest costs, the very specific costs. But asking me for a country that I could name as a good example is very difficult because each country is very different. And that is a particularity, by the way, of the European Union. Some people say everything is decided in Brussels. That is not the case. There are many areas where the member states have to take their own responsibility. And one of them is exactly in the area of social security, of healthcare, where different approaches can coexist.
Would you say that mandatory practices, for instance, MTPL or any other different sort of mandatory insurance, in the long term or even in the medium term can increase the penetration of insurance in general within the country? Or such an involvement from the government side is, on the contrary, does no good?
I like your question, because this is a question that has been raised in Europe many, many times. And people lobbied me when I was in charge of insurance regulation at the European Commission. They lobbied me to introduce new mandatory insurances. I resisted that because I think that it has to be a bottom-up thing. The people need to ask the insurance, and the insurance industry needs to respond to that. The government should not regulate everything. I think something needs to be left to the market. And there is one country in Europe, by the way, if you're interested in that has a lot of mandatory insurance, and that's France.
At the same time, you know, I understand that in order to increase attractiveness of insurance, you need to give people, in this bottom-up environment, you need to give people the information. What are some of the best examples of, both state and private cooperation of giving information to people? How should the government and companies motivate people to get insured?
Again, a very good question, because insurance is very complex. Most people outside the insurance industry do not know how this is done. They think it's a kind of a gamble on the future or an investment, but basically the insurance industry should become much more transparent. And this is part of Solvency II. Under Solvency II, one of the elements of Solvency II was to create more transparency in the insurance sector, because contrary to the banking sector, which already for many years was very much more focused on public disclosure, the insurance sector always remained a little bit in the corner. And under Solvency II, each insurance company will be required to publish a report, a solvency and financial condition report, in which it describes, first of all, what are they doing? How are they organized? What's their capital? How is their situation? What are the risks they're dealing with? And that will help to demystify this insurance process, which will always remain complex because people quickly leave you when they hear about technicalities. But it is very simple. Insurance is all about risk and premium.
Before we switch to talk about the pandemic, which I'm very interested in, I want to ask you about the role of the Insurance State Supervision Service here in Georgia. And before we go into the side of discussing actual work, I want to ask you about the general approach. Such a regulator, what should be their approach in general? Should they act as a watchman or that overlooks the process, or should the organization act as a more hands-on regulator?
I think the answer is very clear. You need to have an engaged supervisor or regulator, whatever you want to call it. It's very important that the insurance industry knows that their problems are professionally dealt with by a supervisor. And it's important for the supervisor that it knows the community that it is supervising. And in the old days, we had this hands-off approach, whereby you had inspections sometimes or sometimes not. You had to deliver papers. But for instance, on the Solvency II, we organize a dialogue. There must be a dialogue between the insurer and the supervisor. And a dialogue is not a combination of two monologues. It's really a conversation between the two sides of the bargain. And that is actually what the supervisory authority should be. Now, you asked me about the authority here in Georgia. What I like about it, I met them today and yesterday. Many young people eager to learn, hands-on, professional. That's very important. And that is a guarantee for Georgia that you will move in the right direction. Also the fact that your authority is now present on the international scene. Because you are part, I said already, you're part of Europe. But you have to show that. You need to have contact with the European Supervisory Authority, EIOPA, based in Frankfurt. You need to have contact with the International Association of Insurance Supervisors. And Georgia is appearing there. And that's very important because if it continues to play that role, it can be an example for some other countries in the region, in the same way as this has happened with countries like Slovenia in the southern part of Europe. So I think it's very important, and in the interest of Georgia, that you have a supervisor that is open-minded, that is proactive, and that is engaged in its supervision of the sector.
All right, let's turn to discuss pandemic, which technically is not over yet, even though we, on a daily basis, we don't feel like we felt 2 years ago, for instance. Let me ask you a very broad question. How did the pandemic change the global insurance market?
It did not change it.
Wow.
Yes, that was the problem. The problem with the pandemic was that we had in the past SARS and some other diseases which were taking place far away from here. But the insurance industry had already reacted on that by including in most insurance policies an exclusion clause for pandemics. And that's something that I also experienced as a policyholder, but I never thought about that. And then suddenly you have this pandemic. And so I had to cancel trips, travels, hotels, could do a lot of things. I went to my insurance company, I said, well, I want to get the reimbursement. Oh no, you're not covered. The pandemic is an exclusion clause. So basically, the impact on the insurance industry has not been as big as it was feared. We had a lot of problems in the area of business interruption, because it's an insurance that is not so prevalent in continental Europe, but very much in the UK and in the US, in Australia. And there were problems because it was argued by the insurers that the business interruption they had to close down that this was not covered by the insurance policies. And then some people try to say, well, we have to change the contracts afterwards, which of course you cannot do in insurance. So basically business interruption has not been covered in most cases in the world. Sometimes voluntarily insurers agreed to pay out hotels, restaurants, although they were not obliged to do that. But in general, I must say, I personally feel that the industry showed too little empathy for the policyholders that were very often left in the cold. And that's had a number of consequences. First of all, supervisory authorities in a number of countries intervened to remind the insurance industry that in the end they have to work in the interest of the policyholders and not only in their own interest. And that has helped. And I think the industry has quite understood this message. I think if something like that will happen again, we will have a different approach than the one that we had now, where often we started to fight with the insurance industry. Is it covered? Is it not covered? We had to consult the lawyers, and you know lawyers, two lawyers have three views, so you always end up in a difficult state. But basically, the impact has been, it was feared that the impact would be huge, and obviously the insurance industry would not be in a position to cover closures of the whole economy that goes beyond the means of the industry. But what we need for the future is a system whereby the public and the private sector cooperate so that the damage that people suffer from lockdown, if we ever will have a lockdown again, I'm not sure, if that ever happens again, that people do get compensation for the damage resulting from that.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Van Hulen. It's been a pleasure talking to you. I think we covered many important and interesting points. Thank you very much for the interview once again, and we hope to cooperate with you in the future as well.
It was my pleasure, and I'm very happy that I could give my first interview in Georgia on my first stay in Georgia. Thank you.
And that's all for today. We will meet next Sunday, 11 a.m. sharp. But before that, follow us on BM.G. See you soon.
The Checkpoint is presented by GM Pharma, the first international multinational pharmaceutical company in Georgia. GM Pharma, to serve those who need it most.